Yes, we are live. Just waiting for everyone to join. We have 0 spectators so far. Yes. Okay, waiting for everyone to join. We're really sorry for the delays, and we're asking you kindly if you'd like to comment with join. We're really sorry
With your name.
For the delays, and we're asking you kindly if you'd like to comment with join. We're really sorry for the delays, and we're asking you kindly if you'd like to comment with sorry for the delays, and we're asking you kindly if you'd like to comment with sorry for the delays, and we're asking you kindly if you'd like to comment with sorry
Diego, can you turn off your or put your headsets? Because I'm listening to myself. Diego, can you turn off your or put your headsets? Because I'm listening to myself. Diego, can you turn off your? Okay. Very good. You can put it back, Diego. It was just
Okay.
very good. I think we can start. So for those who don't know us, my name is Skander Safi, and I'm here a member of the task force on policy recommendation implementation, and together with Diego, Mendoza from IFMSA Mexico will be presenting the update on the bylaws change proposal that we would like to submit by the 1st of July, and we would like to get as much input as possible from you. We know that the timing might not be the best for everyone, but hoping that you can join us later or watch us in the video so that you can also submit your comments. So just waiting for some more people to join, but at the same time, if you have access to the Google event, if you can just comment with by introducing yourself, putting your name and your NMO and maybe an expectations that you might have. And meanwhile, we can move forward. So very quickly, we'll put you in the context if you're not aware on why we are gathering today and what is the purpose of the task force in general. So just to summarize in a couple of points, the first one, having this policy-making reform in IFMSA for the past several years that unfortunately has not led to concrete results. Every term there were always discussions without a final outcome. So hopefully this time will be a great gathering in Mexico so that we can have it done. Just to mention also that the current system that we're doing policy in IFMSA is considered to be one of the strongest within the students' organization. However, it's still in need of some adjustment, and this is why we're having this process, and hopefully it will be as much as inclusive as possible. The expected output of this process is to have smoother way of making policy that would go in line with IFMSA global health priorities, between brackets, since we also consider that we do not have them, so that will be also in line with another process of defining our priorities. And then finally, we'd like to highlight the discussion that took place for the past 2 years, so that you know exactly what happened and what is our mandate. So Diego, I don't know if you would like to move ahead with the timeline. Or...
Okay, yeah. So first of all, as Iskander said, this is a problem that was tackled mainly during the March meeting in Turkey. So it was brought by the past ATO. So afterwards, we had the team of official meeting 4, where we came with some discussions, mainly with the document that was shared with the animal presidents to be a little bit more inclusive. So afterwards, we have animal consultation service and webinars created through April to August to create a little more awareness about the subject that was brought during the March meeting in Turkey. And afterwards, we have during the August meeting in Macedonia, we had a discussion, and that's where the plenary was mandated to the executive board to create a task force on the implementation of such issues that were discussed during Town 4. So that's where we were created during the August meeting. Afterwards, there was a little gap of working due to some deadlines and the creation of the task force and not having a full team. And during the March meeting, we were mandated to have an extension on the task force, where we will be working on the Town 4, as we said before. And that's where we start creating all these new violent change proposals. During this March to June, that's where we are trying to discuss a little bit forward with the animals about the results of the Town 4 and the surveys that we sent to the animal server, so that we could implement all these results from Town 4 to change them to a value change proposal. So that's what we're been working on the task force.
Okay, very good. But as you can see, there have been many animal consultations and discussions happening, and the goal of the task force is actually to finalize and implement all of the outcomes of the discussions that took place in the past. So this is where this task force was created, and our mandate as task force, and as you see that the difficulties that we had to be created in this term is to implement the Tom 4 outcomes mainly, and the August meeting 2015 discussion in a form of value change proposal that is to be submitted by the 1st of July. So the members consist of various active members from IFMSA with different backgrounds. So mainly we have NMO representatives, David Galliano, who's animal president of IFMSA Quebec, Diego Mendoza, who's a representative of IFMSA Mexico. We have Jan Pelosa, who's an external, who's the past president of the Alcohol Policy Youth Network. Then we have from the current representative of the current TO, Marwa Daly from Association Tunisia, and myself as former scope director or former TO representative. Diego? Diego, would you like to go next? Or?
Oh, yeah. So on the violent change proposal, the topics that we were discussed during after the Town 4 resolutions, first of all, we start with the core values of the policy statement, as it was brought by the animals that the actual process of the policy statement were not really that explained a little bit more, and also that the definition about what a policy statement are, what we're using policies, it's quite vague, and it's not like really inclusive, and it's quite difficult for some animals to understand what the meaning of the policy statement is. Also, we have some definitions change. First of all, on the current bylaw, we just have a policy statement, and in the definitions that we brought were policy statement, policy papers, and some different definitions that we used international. All these definitions were used on the Town 4 document, And also we wanted to look for some definition ourselves. So actually the definitions that we're using Tom for, we changed some of the names because we looked on some resources and we tried to make them equal to the international level. So we tried to change those definitions, and right now with the bylaw change proposal, we're proposing to have not just a policy statement, we're trying to implement also the policy statement with a new definition of what a policy statement is, and we're adding also the policy papers with a set of stuff that we're trying to implement as well. Also, we're trying to implement some new deadlines. These deadlines are going to be working, and we're going to be explaining a little bit more because we know that having new deadlines, it's quite difficult for the NMO to try to implement them. And in the past, we have suspended some bylaw change, some bylaws to try to fulfill with the deadline. So we're going to be explaining a little bit more about the deadlines a little bit forward in this webinar. We know that having more deadlines is quite difficult, but we're trying to explain it them why we're trying to create new deadlines and try to submit some stuff as well. What else?
Diego, would you like to go through the deadlines, or do you want to leave it for later?
If you want, I can explain it right now.
Okay, I just need to.
You want to share? Okay. Yeah, so we split the deadlines in March meeting and August meeting, so it will be easier for you to understand. For the March meeting, we will have different deadlines. We have one that is already on the bylaw, which is February 1st, but we are adding January 1st as another deadline. Okay, so for starting for a policy statement and a position paper, we're going to be starting with January 1st, where you're supposed to be sending a draft policy statement with the policy statement and the position paper, and also you have to send a policy commission to the NMO mailing list. So you just have to create your policy paper, the draft of your policy paper, your position paper, and the policy commission, and send it to the NMO so they can actually give you some input about this part, or they want to join you on this part. You will have a whole month to work with your policy commission, and the NMOs are going to be giving you input. And in February 1st, you have to send your final policy statement and position paper to the General Secretariat. And the General Secretariat must send or share your policy paper and your position paper and policy statement to the NMO server. So it will be shared on February 8th. This is a deadline that we already have. And we're adding another deadline, which is February 19th, where this is the deadline for anyone that reads your policy statement and your position paper to submit any amendment. Well, this part is not already finished. We're trying to have some input from you on the amendment part, because this is an issue that was being tackled in the past, that some policy statements, they are totally changed during the GA, so it's quite difficult for you to be tracking during the GA of the policy statement and all the changes that occur during the GA. So we're trying to bring a lower amount of amendments to the policy statement. So we're trying to change this part a little bit. This is not the final part. We're still gathering your input about this subject, and that's what we're trying to do. So that's basically, we're going to be having a January 1st deadline, which is a new deadline where you have to submit your draft, your policy draft, to the NMO, so NMOs can know that you're working on this. And in February 1st, you have to send the final document to the General Secretariat, and the General Secretary is going to be sharing it during February 8th, more or less 2 weeks, where you can submit your amendments. And after February 19th, you can, well, we're not finished with this part, but all these amendments are going to be shared during the first day of the working day of the General Assembly. So this document will be shared during the GA on the first day. So this is for the August meeting. For the March meeting. For the August meeting, it's quite similar, but it's some changes. When you have to submit your draft is June 1st. You have to submit the policy statement and position paper draft, also with sharing your policy commission on January 1st. sorry, June 1st, and then you have to submit the final version of it during July 1st, which you have to send it to the General Secretariat, and the General Secretary is going to be sharing it in July 8th. This deadline is already on the bylaws. And after that, you're going to be having 2 weeks to make amendments to the policy statement and to the position paper. And the deadline for that is July 19th. And it's the same. All these work must be shared with the NMO presidents during the first day of the working day of the General Assembly. So these are the deadlines that we're submitting. July 1st is a deadline that you already know. July 8th, it's already in the bylaws. The only deadline that we're adding to this part will be January 1st and June 1st, where you have to submit your draft to the NMO mailing list.
Yeah. If you have any questions, like so far, maybe it's a little bit too much information, feel free to submit your questions as a comment or in the Q&A section. But yeah, we can continue.
Okay. Yeah, so about that part, it would be formation of the policy commission. This policy commission is going to be created. The proposer of the policy statement and position paper must create a policy commission. This policy commission must be integrated by one member of the TO and one member of an NMO that is not from your region. That way, we're going to be trying to encourage people to work together with the TO and also working together with another region. So we're trying to improve the regionalization part with the policy commission. So this policy commission is going to be working on ensuring the quality of your policy statement and position paper. So when you're submitting your policy statement and position and policy papers draft, you must submit this policy commission as well, which must be integrated of 3 persons.
Yeah. Maybe can I add to the comment, like add a comment on the commission? We might believe that it's perhaps a little bit tough task to actually find different members for different commissions on the policy statements that are to be proposed. But we believe that it's somehow feasible, so that it would increase the inclusiveness within the policy statement formation, and even with the skills that the members would have in the topic, but also in practicing the exercise of actually reviewing the quality of the policy statement, might lead to an actual representation, great representation of the policy statement afterwards. And also, if we try to maybe compare with the previous like what is happening right now in the bylaws and the way we are dealing with it. So the first thing is the policy statement review committee that exists currently in our bylaws. The fact is that this review committee hasn't been effective in the previous terms, and we have seen many reasons, including the sort of mandate of this group to work, also the timeline that they would work in, but also like the way they would work until the GA having all the skills in all the topics so that they can review those policy statements accordingly. And this is where the idea of the commission came from, and also the fact that the TOM for outcome report didn't include it, so it was supposed to be abolished for the next bylaw change proposal. The second thing is the urgency policy statement. So we haven't seen it in the TOM for outcome report, and the fact that it hasn't been used adequately in the past, and we've seen that there are several other alternative options so that such statements can be produced. So the general idea is actually not to include it anymore. Then when it comes to to having an inclusive process that would involve the NMOs from different regions and different levels of experience in developing policy statements, but also the TO members who would be the ones who would do their best in representing and using those policy statements at the internal and external levels. So we believe that this process would actually involve both actors, and it would be a great exercise in a collaboration between both of them. But also when it comes to regional representation, the regional directors might have also a great role in promoting the the proposals and also getting input in how it does or how much it is relevant to the region accordingly. And finally, about the amendments and the adoption. So Diego mentioned a bit about the amendments and how much we're still facing difficulties in finding a way so that all NMOs can provide their amendments in a timely manner. But at the same time, we would like to prevent some situations that happened in the past, but also in general, the fact of having a lot of amendments during the GA might lead to some difficulties in analyzing all of them before the vote and then the adoption. But also sometimes some amendments that are presented during the GA that are completely changing the scope of the policy statements, and we would like to prevent that by having all the amendments and having a really dynamic discussion before the GA. So this is where the proposal right now is actually to have a deadline for amendments by the 19th of February, if I'm not mistaken, but it would be 1 week or a bit more before the GA, so that NMOs have the time to analyze those amendments and continue the sort of informal discussion until the adoption of the policy statements. However, we're still not that much convinced, so we'd like to still hear from you. The call that we sent, the deadline is tomorrow, so that you can still submit your proposals, and then we'll see which option would suit the best. And I guess in the worst case, it would be up to the discussion at the present session with smoother discussions before during the GA. I don't know, Diego, if you want to add anything in regards to what I said.
Yeah, about the amendment part. So far, right now in the bylaws, you can submit amendments until 2 hours before the plenary, where it's going to be voted the policy statement. So we have that same idea. So one of the questions that was brought by a member of the TOE was that after that deadline, if you could submit more amendments. So that's the tricky part that we're trying to figure it out a little bit more, because we don't know if after that deadline you cannot actually submit any further amendments, which is the scope that we were trying to. But that's one of the main discussions that we were discussing in the task force. So as Iskander said, we would like to encourage you, if you have any possible solution, or if you want to bring some new ideas, fresh ideas to the discussion, you can send it before tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to implement that part.
Yeah, maybe just to add about the amendment, 2 hours before the plenary, we were still unsure if it's on the text or on the motion itself. So that's what makes things a little bit tricky, and we're hoping that we can find a way to actually prevent this.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think maybe we can have a quick overview on the preliminary proposal, so that you can, for those especially who are not acquainted yet with the content, you can still have a look at it. And we're very much looking forward to having your questions, and maybe if you would like to clarify any point, especially if you have some input, we'll very much welcome it. And if you see if there's any gap in the implementation, which we have been working on for the past couple of months, but it's still, as you can see, a dynamic process. So moving forward to the documents. Yeah. Diego, would you like to present the first part and then I can continue?
Oh, yeah. So as you might see, on the first part is the general part. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. What's new over there? We added two new points, which is reflecting a global health issue that the Federation has the capacity to take a stance on, and follow up by the relevant team of officials. So mainly this general part, the discussion that we had is that the past definition of policy was not that broad. So we tried to make it a little bit clearer what we wanted, mainly having a bigger issue with the global health issue. We think that's the over scope of the policy statement and the policy inside the IFMSA. In the past, in the current bylaws, we only had that it must be kept with IFMSA mission and objectives, but didn't say any more further. But we thought that the main issue about having policy inside the federation is to reflect what the federation thinks on a scope on a global health issue. So that's the changes on the general part. We made it a little bit more clear about this. This is what we wanted from the federation on the policy level.
Yeah.
Then
I could go ahead with the definitions if you want. So in regards to definitions, as you can see, that we were mostly used to the appellation policy statements, but what has been introduced last year is the policy paper, which is a more like thorough document that would go into the evidence behind the policy statement itself, and how it is somehow relevant to our field of work, and implicitly how we can act upon it. But the policy statement is a more concise and short document that would simply state the importance of the topic and what we are calling for as IFMSA, so that we could use it in a very efficient way during the relevant activities where we could somehow try to advocate for a change to be made. And maybe just a quick sort of comment about something that was added in the Tom for outcome report, and there were some discussions about it, whether or not to include the resolutions and the definitions or not. And the fact is that it is still a sort of blurry concept and not that much used currently in IFMSA. We thought that maybe it would be good not to include it right now and stick to the basics that could actually be used as a sort of resolution, and hopefully if the system gets solid enough, we could include it again. Policy Commission, Diego?
Yep. So this is what we already said about the Policy Commission. The Policy Commission is going to be the proposer of the policy statement and position paper must send a policy commission. This policy commission must be represented by one member of the TO, two members of one must be from an animal from another region. On this part, that policy commission is the one who must be looking like if the draft that you submitted is working well, is of high quality, gathering more evidence internationally, and all this stuff. So we thought having a member of the TO would be like more inclusive to work together between the NMOs and between the TO. So we thought it would be a really wise idea to have this. So we came with the same idea or resolution that was given to us from Tom 4. So this policy commission is composed of 3 members, and you must submit it. We know it might be a little bit difficult for you to find 3 people, 1 member from the TO, and we also have discussed this because of the burden that will come to the TO. But most of the TO, when we asked for some input, they agreed that it would be a nice idea, and they didn't come with any problems of having more workload with having to be working on the policy commission. This part, which might be one of the ideas that might come from animals, that it would be really difficult for the TO to gather or to work on every single policy statement. But we think it's a great idea to work with this policy commission. We know that, for example, we have different policy statements that you have to look for different people, but we also see this as an opportunity to have like some capacity building inside the federation, and not only working with people that you already know, to try to improve this part with the regionalization as well. So that's why we were trying to have one animal from other region that it's not yours. I don't know if you want to say something else about the policy commission.
Yeah, just that try to compare with the previous tentatives when it comes to the review of the policy statement. Sometimes it's hard to also have an overview on like how to make a policy in general and what are the different topics in which we work on. But we believe it's like especially if there will be more sort of narrow IFMSA priorities. Hopefully that will be the case in the upcoming terms. They will allow us to actually focus more on the policy statements that are are actually relevant to our federation and would provide a smoother process to the formation of those policy commissions. There were some questions that are still in the document, and we didn't have the time to actually respond or go through them. But the process of the formation of the policy commission is up to the NMO that is proposing. So they are deciding which ones are part of the commission, and they should announce it in the NMO server. Then it's a good exercise, especially for TO NMO collaboration, but also for some NMOs who might lack some experience in the topic. They can get some benefits of collaboration with other experienced NMOs. And I don't know. Yeah, I think this is basically the general idea that has worked in other organizations. This is where the idea came from, and we hope that it might also it would also be efficient in ours.
Just to remind you about the deadline for the policy commission that you have to submit, as Iskander said, it would be January 1st for the March meeting, and it would be June 1st for the August meeting. We're going to be seeing this in the adoption of the policies, but I think it would be easier for you to know that you have to send your policy commission, how it would be created during that deadline, which would be January 1st and June 1st.
Yeah. Also, something that like we have defined a little bit, like what are the tasks of the policy commission, which are perhaps a little bit detailed when it comes to the review, but also to the coordination of the policy statement discussion at the GA. But at the same time, seeing that it is a big group of people where the different tasks can be split up. So at the end of the day, not all the members are required to be at the GA itself. So there could be a lot of online work, and sometimes also it's good to have people who could work online so that they can provide with a different perspective from the rush of the GA. I think that's it. Do you want to go to the adoption policies, or I can do it? Yeah. Okay. So for the adoption of the policies, all the deadlines are mentioned in the timeline that Diego showed. So I think it's somehow clear enough. We're just hoping to resolve some of the comments that have been asked. So we need to meet up again within the task force to respond to that. Then when it comes to the proposal itself, the general idea is to have more regional representation. This is where the idea of the co-submission between two NMOs from two different regions, especially from the fact that to see that the issue is relevant enough for like more than one region, and I think the involvement of other NMOs in policy making. And yeah, also for regards to the amendment, as we said, that this is what we are proposing, even though we're not like highly convinced, and we would like to have more opinion about it. But if you think that this is the way forward to go, we could also see it as an option to pursue. And finally, about the motion to adopt needs 2/3 majority as other motions, and the dissemination of the policy statement that has to be done as soon as possible within the social media platforms and website. Expiry revision, Diego.
Reviewing about the expiry and revision, I think that's the same that we already have in the bylaw right now, that policy documents will expire after 3 years unless otherwise voted by the General Assembly. I think that's the same bylaw. There's no change at all. And we also have the policy statement revision report, which is already on the bylaws as well. That will be submitted by the executive board. Proposal of expired policy statement should be followed by paragraph.
Okay.
So I think that's the same that we already have. The only one that we're creating a new one that will the proposal, which will be changed because we're changing the adoption process. But I think that's the only change so far from the bylaw that we already have right now.
Yeah. So we're also counting on the EB vision report to actually provide a better insight on the policy statement, so that we know how to move forward with the formation of the commissions and the policy statements. We're still waiting for your questions and comments, but meanwhile, we can get to have a sort of summary on all the information that we have shared with you. And hopefully it was clear enough. And if you still have some questions, or maybe you didn't have the opportunity to attend the whole webinar, you can still attend the one from tomorrow with David and Marwa, so that you get also a different insight, because we also have our sort of areas of expertise in the topic, and hopefully we'll try to respond to your questions and concerns. I don't know if there's any questions so far. Thank you, Karim, for all the encouragement.
Might seem a little bit difficult to get together or know definitions. At the beginning, I had the same trouble, so I created a document for myself where I tried to put on a perspective about the position paper policy statement. Maybe we can share them, or during the game, maybe we can share them, because I know one of the questions was mainly about having just the policy statement as the only paper we have on the federation, and why we would like to include papers instead of the one that we already have. But when you finish, you can see the scope of the different papers that we are trying to implement. It's quite good to know that there are some different papers that might help to the one who are trying to advocate on the external level. So maybe that part is a little bit confusing right now, which was confusing for me at the beginning. But maybe we can share during the GA. I don't know if you want, we can share this document so you can see how a position paper will look like, how the policy statement will look like with the implementation that we're trying to bring with the bylaw change proposal.
Yeah, very good. We'll do our best to share those examples so that it becomes clearer to you, and that especially if when you'll be about to vote, there will be clear understanding on the whole process, and hopefully you will get more involved in the policy making of the federation in general. Okay, we'll wait for a little bit, maybe. Yeah, so we have a question from Vilda. So the question is, will you propose all the bylaw changes to be adopted in one go, or will you propose them one by one? As in, is it all or nothing, or could be some accepted and others part not? So we have not discussed this thoroughly, but eventually what we're thinking of is to submit the proposal with the whole bylaw change on the policy statements, together with the changes in the paragraph 9.4, which includes all the deadlines. But then again, if there are proposals to amend the current proposal, I would suppose that it is sort of feasible, but we would very much appreciate if this is also up to discussion with the task force, but also within the president session for the GA. I don't know, Diego, if you have.
Yeah, we discussed a little bit during the last online meeting, but we didn't come with a concrete decision on this part. Maybe I will agree with Iskander. Maybe we can submit it on blocks, so it would be easier for you to implement stuff that way. But that's up to the task force. But I think that would be a really wise idea to come blocks. I remember that it was used for the small working group and involvement about the part of the submission of the candidatures and all the draft that they wanted to submit. They split it as a block. Maybe it would be great, so that way we're not taking a bylaw change proposal. If you don't agree with that, you will be mainly trying to block it out as a whole. So I think it would be wise, but yeah, we have to discuss this part as a task force.
Also, as taken from the experience of the previous reforms that took place, mainly on the leadership structure, on the programs, and on the finances, those bylaw change proposals were actually also proposed in blocks. But I think the key process in this is that if there's something like a high concern that is to be shared, perhaps we can discuss it beforehand so that we can arrive to a sort of consensus between the NMOs, the TO, and the task force, which like the mandate is mainly to implement the TOM4 outcomes. So there are just a couple of details that are maybe some could consider them as minor, but it can at some point have a lot of consequences on the federation. So I think we can discuss them point by point, and then get to the point where we can actually submit minor amendments or try to achieve this consensus before the 1st of July. I hope that it was clear enough, Filda, if you have further questions or clarification. And for the rest as well, if you have any question, otherwise we can conclude.
Just to remind you that you can send your input until tomorrow. So if you have any question or you want to say something, you can send it to the task force.
Yeah, so you can actually send it to tf.policyrepresentation@ifmsa.org, and the email will be shared with all the members of the task force. I don't know if there's another question. Yeah, okay, there's another question from Karim, IFMSA president. So the question says, okay, as a reflection on the proposals for the reform, it was proposed as one proposal to avoid what happened with the project's bylaws in August meeting 2011, when half of the ideas were accepted and half weren't, ending up with an ambiguous, non-functioning structure. Amendments would still be valid, available, and a tool to be used. So yeah, just to mention that especially if we don't want to be a radical process, so we're open to all the input. Just having in mind that this process has been ongoing for quite some time, and several of the options that were proposed were discussed beforehand, and some new might be of a good additions, or it might be a risk that we are taking. So just taking into account all those factors, and thank you, Karim, for the input, because I think most of us were not in Denmark in the August meeting 2011, where this issue also happened. Diego, would you like to add anything?
No.
Okay. Maybe you would like to respond to this one. So Vilde asked, how will the function of the bylaw of urgency policy be preserved? Do you want to respond to this one, or? Diego? Diego? Okay. So maybe I could give a few comments on that. Is that the fact that the urgency policy statement can only be proposed where that same policy statement was not proposed as a normal or like usual policy statement, which is deemed invalid. So this situation is to be dropped out. Then when it comes to an urgency that is to be expressed, there are several ways that are also under the mandate of the EB, which is either a simple statement that can be shared on the social media, or what we can also call communique. But I don't know if this should be put in the bylaws or not, because it seems like it's also obvious that like such a thing can be done by the executive board, and this is why we also thought that the urgency policy statement shouldn't be like the sort of backup plan for some of the policy statement proposals, so that we really want to focus on the input that is gathered by the NMOs, and we take our time so that we adopt a document that that was inclusive and got the input of all the members. Diego, are you back? Diego?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, as you said, on the past, I can remember one time where a origin policy statement was applied correctly. In the past, it was mainly just to focus on a policy statement that didn't fill the deadline to be submitted on time. So I think on the past, it was not really well used. So I think, well, I don't have to add anything further with what you have said on that part. That only on the past, I can remember Taiwan and I can remember Turkey were a origin policy statement because they didn't send the policy statement on time. So I don't find any way that it was used correctly, and actually it was discussed on Tom 4 outcomes. So it was an outcome that was submitted by those.
We also tried to discuss, maybe we didn't share it with you, we tried to discuss like the concept of urgency within policy that can take place in IFMSA. And such thing can be either in relation to like new emergent public or global health issues that we should have a stance on. So this is why maybe if there's a state of urgency, the executive board can take over on that. Otherwise, we believe that this process should still wait for the next General Assembly so that we can have a stronger and more solid stance on it. So, yeah. And just waiting maybe for a couple of minutes if there aren't any more questions. And we hope that our responses were clear enough, and we'll hopefully get back to you within your comments and maybe some of your concerns until the 1st of July, so that we will have a more inclusive process. Okay, just a couple of minutes more. Okay, so I think there are not any more questions. So I think that we can conclude this webinar. We hope that it was beneficial enough so that you got to know more about the process and what are we proposing until the 1st of July. We hope that we can stick to the deadline so that let us input and take it into account in the situation. And if you missed the webinar, you can still attend the one tomorrow at 8 p.m. GMT. So tomorrow's Sunday, and yeah, hopefully we'll get to see you in Mexico, and we'll get to finally adopt this new policy reform. Diego, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just would like to thank you for coming to the webinar, because it shows that you are looking to know about the policy reform that we're trying to implement as task force. So I think this is a huge beginning for the federation. So I'm really glad that you are here looking this or watching this webinar. So yeah, thank you.
Very good. So hoping to see you very soon, and have a nice end of day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.